For this assignment, I'm going to have you build your own image from a Dockerfile. So you're basically going to be going line by line in a Dockerfile and figuring out how to make it work correctly on your own. This is one of my favorite things to actually do in Docker. I'm a little bit nerdy about it. I get kind of pumped up because creating a new Dockerfile from an existing app to me feels like it's actually making the app better, because I love the challenge of making something that was previously complex or inconsistent in its process and becoming predictable and automated. And that's really what a Dockerfile is all about. So a common exercise for a Docker admin is to make custom images and help others make Dockerfiles for their own source code. Often you'll need to go looking at the official images, and you may not know that much about the app or even the language or packages it uses, but you still need to Dockerize it, which is to say that you're making a Dockerfile for an existing app or service and you're getting it to work properly in a container. But that process means you'll need to go searching for matching official images or one that's maybe not official but as close to what you need as you can get, and investigating that image repository and the Docker files in it to understand how it's built and then how you can build from it using the from command. You'll need to learn the art of melding that existing image with your build instructions to get a fully working image in the end. So in this one, we're going to take an existing Node.js app and Dockerize it. And again, you don't actually have to know really anything about Node.js other than to say, this is a web app, and I'm going to give you some information, and you're going to need to create a Docker file from it. And really, the overview here is you're going to create a Docker file, then you're going to try to build it, and then you're going to try to test it in a container. And then once you do that and get it working, then you can push it up to Docker Hub, and then we're going to remove it locally, and then we're going to run it again. And really expect, especially this build and testing part, to be iterative. It's very rare for me to get a Docker file correct on the first shot. So then I'll try to build it and I'll get a build error, and then I'll keep changing it and then build it again until I get that to work and finish. And then I'll try to test it in a container and it doesn't always work the first time. So I'll have to go change the Docker file again and rebuild it and then create another container from it. So expect that process, and you're going to learn tons just doing that on your own. So for this assignment, the actual file you're going to start with is in the Dockerfile assignment 1 directory in the root of our repository that you downloaded from GitHub, the same one we've been working with. And do note that we are going to use actually an official image, which means there's going to be lots of good documentation around how to use it. And that includes the Docker file for the official image. And if you remember me mentioning Alpine as a very small Linux distribution, that's the one I'd like you to use here. And you're going to use a specific version of Node that they will list on Docker Hub, which is the 6.x version. So you can use any of those options underneath the 6 branch. And the expected test result is that you're actually able to bring it up on your web browser locally using the localhost. And then once you get it working locally, you're going to actually tag it with a proper name so that it's using your Docker Hub account name and a new repo name that you can create on your own. And you're going to push it up to Docker Hub. And then once you've gone to Docker Hub and you've checked out that it is there and looks correct, then remove the local image out of your cache, and we're going to run the container one last time so that we'll actually re-download from Docker Hub and then run it just to make sure that everything is as expected. And just like other assignments, if you get stuck, and it's okay if you do, remember that the next following lecture is actually me going through this assignment myself and how I might do it. And like other assignments, there's going to be several options and ways to go about it because, again, this isn't an exact science. Your Docker file might not look exactly the same as my Docker file, but if it builds correctly without error, and then you get the website working on a web browser with localhost, then I would call that a success. Good luck, and see you in the next lecture. All right, these are the answers for the assignment of creating our first Docker file. So if I'm in the root of our repository that you downloaded from the beginning of this course, we should be able to go into Dockerfile assignment 1. And if we look in there, I've only got one file that I really care about, and that's the Docker file. Presumably, this is a source that somebody gave to me, and they're an app dev that is using Node.js, and I don't really know a lot about it, so I'm just going to edit the Docker file. Okay, so if I follow the instructions from the developer, I know the first thing I need to do is I need to go get my from image, and I know I need to use the node official. Let me go look it up.
there's the node official. I need version 6 running on Alpine. So there's 6 Alpine. All right, so 6-Alpine. Okay, and the next thing, I need to expose port 3000. So I'm exposing 3000 here because that's what the app is designed to run on, but when I run it later with Docker run, I need to remember that I'm going to have to use the -P with port 80 going to port 3000. All right, this one needs to use a package manager to install this app, Teeny. So I'll use a run command for that. And then I'm going to make a directory. All right, I'll just make them separate run commands. So run apk add, and then run make dir. Okay, and then I need to copy in a single file, it looks like. So I might as well change the working directory to that directory we just created. So work dir user source app, that'll save me time later. And I can do a copy, package JSON. All right, then I need to run an install command. It looks like, so it'll be a run. This one says run another command to clean up. All right, well, usually when you run a cleanup command, you want it to run the same line or the same run line as the actual install. That way it removes everything all at the same time and you only get one image layer. This is best for image space, so I'm going to add it here. And what the double and sign, or the ampersand as it's called, does here is it actually is a conditional. It says to the command line on Linux that says, hey, if you've done the first one and it's successful, then do the second command. You might also see people sometimes putting in a semicolon, and that's fine too. The difference is a semicolon doesn't have a dependency on whether or not the first command was successful. It just runs the second one regardless. So I like the double ampersand. All right, copy in some more files, it looks like. If I'm going to copy in everything, I'll just do ... That's an easy way to do it. Make sure there's a space in the middle. That's basically saying copy everything from my current directory on the host to the current working directory in the image. Okay, so I'm down to the last one. And this one looks a little tricky. I've got 4 different parts of the command I need to run there. So with this format, I need to run teeny, then a comma. So this is in a JSON format, this particular command stanza, -- comma, node, bin, dub. And if I was curious about that, I could always go over to my browser and do docker run or docker build cmd. And I bet you Dockerfile reference. Here on this page, I could go to the cmd, and it talks about the exec form. And if you read here, you'll actually notice that there's something called a shell form, and then there's also something they're mentioning about an entry point. So we're going to talk about that later in the course in a more advanced Dockerfile section. But for now, this is good. Let's try to build it. Docker build. I don't really care what I call it right now because I'm just trying to test the build, and usually my builds don't work the first time. So I'm just going to call it test node. I'm going to build this directory. Okay, looks like it built correctly. So let's see if we can run it. I'm going to do a --rm because I really don't care to keep it after I've tested it. So I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to need to name it. Oh yeah, and I need to put in a port to open the port. So it wants to run an 80, but it listens on 3000. Okay, that's actually a normal message that we get from Teeny inside of Alpine, so I won't worry about that too much. Let's go see if it works. Sweet. We'll see the logs there. Okay, looks like it's... Thank you, Captain Picard. I appreciate the applause. I appreciate the support. Thanks. All right. Let's Control C out of there. Now, it should be at the top of my images list. So I need to rename it before I put it on Docker Hub. So Docker tag. And I believe the format is the old and the new. Yeah, so Docker tag test node. What do you call it? Brett Fisher testing node. And I'll just leave it at latest. So Docker push and this. And all we need to worry about is the name. So Docker push Brett Fisher testing node. All right, let's go over to Docker and look. And there we go, testing node. Okay. So let me just clear the screen and Docker image ls, and yeah, it's there. I'm going to remove it. Docker image rm Brett Fisher testing. All right. So now I'm going to actually run it. Docker container run --rm -p83,000, just like before. And I'm going to actually call it Brett Fisher testing node, and that should download it and run it. All right. And if I go back over to my browser, localhost, there it is. I can hit refresh just to make sure. Yes,